Hey there, everybody. Seja here, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. And I was thinking today about this concept of psychology and herbal medicine and how so many people out there using herbs are really starting to notice that plants don't just have an effect on our bodies, but they're also having an influence upon our minds and upon our emotional realities too. And I think a big part of the new paradigm of herbal medicine that's been being developed over the last number of decades, I think psychology is a big part of that. I think that we're wanting to practice herbal medicine not just using the plants for the body, right? Not just seeing them as acting on the different organs and systems and tissues of our physiology, but that plants also have this capacity to have an impact and an influence upon our past, upon the conditioned patterns that we hold within our minds, upon our primary emotional reactions, and in that way that these herbs have this ability to kind of reframework, repattern our minds, our psychology, to help us to have more clarity in our minds, help us to have more, I guess I would say, a more consciously directed mind, a more free mind, right? I think it seems like so many people out there just kind of feel like their minds are running the show and that they don't have any conscious control over it, or that, they're constantly at the whim of their past conditioning or of their traumas, and that they need healing in their minds, that their psychology needs assistance to a certain degree. And what I found, and a lot of my students have found, and a lot of other people out there have found, is that plants are amazing for healing the mind, that plants are not just our healers, they're our teachers as well. And I feel like that's a really important concept in the new paradigm of herbal medicine, right? That we're able to really acknowledge and honor the intelligence of plants, and that sometimes they know more than we know, and that we have the ability to learn from them, and through that to cultivate more of a natural mind, right? I think that in our Western culture, there's a big focus on the training of our minds. Our entire educational system is very much rationally oriented on developing analytical, reductionistic thought. And that, I've heard some people say that science is the newest, most major religion in the world, right? And it's the religion that worships the intellect. And I love science. I mean, I was university trained in herbal sciences, so don't think I'm bashing on science. I love science, but I think that there's a certain reorientation in the human mind that can happen, that is important for healing our minds, and that's cultivating more of a natural mind, a mind that is influenced by nature, a mind that's a reflection of nature, a mind that is not just conditioned through what we learn through our culture and the media and the limitations of science, but a mind that is ultimately influenced by the heart. So if we're thinking about psychology and herbalism, right? Like, how can we incorporate more of a psychological model into our framework for learning herbal medicine and studying herbal medicine and applying herbal medicine for people, right? Like, what are some frameworks that we can use to achieve that? What are some ways that we can have a model of the human psyche that links us to the actions of plants? And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I know that was kind of a long introduction, but that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in this video here, in looking at some different systems for incorporating psychology into our herbal practice. And in general, I tend to think of what I call these 3 layers of energetic architecture. This is a major teaching at the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, incorporating these different layers, systems of energetics that really we see pop up cross-culturally all over the world in different, not just herbal, but I would say medical and philosophical systems worldwide. And so one of the main ones that I first learned about really was the 3 doshas of Ayurveda, of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And I really loved that system because it was really simple and straightforward. I mean, we were only working with 3 different patterns, right? Patterns of energetics. And while that helped me to really understand physiology on a deeper level, it also helped me to see more deeply into the relationship between our psychology and our physiology. And ultimately, I think that's what a really effective energetic system does, is that it is the bridge between the physical and the subtle, right? The psychological and spiritual and the physical, so that we can see how the way we think directly influences our body, but conversely, the way our body is directly influences the way we think. And while we all have different physical constitutions, we also have different psychological constitutions, and how each of those three doshas of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha have with them certain psychological dynamics associated with them. So, for example, the earth and water qualities of Kapha, that slow, heavy, kind of congealing quality, can manifest psychologically in a negative way as things like greed, right? People that really like to hoard things and kind of be very, you know, collecting things and like having a really hard time letting things go, right? Because Kapha tends towards stagnation, and they like to kind of cling on and hold on to things. And in that way, they can be really stubborn, right? They can be really stubborn, and once they're set in their mind on the way something is going to be, it's going to be that way, and there's no changing their mind, right? Whereas like a Pitta, right, they can, on a negative side, be more prone to things like anger, frustration, irritability. That fire element, right, can reflect into the mind and be very kind of agitate the mind and lead to things like irritation and frustration. But on the other side of it, they're also natural leaders, right? They've got energy and willpower and drive to, get stuff done, right? And work really hard and achieve things, and kind of, in a way, they're really focused on that achievement and that success, and very goal-oriented and driven kind of people, right? But sometimes that drive can go too far, right? And so while each of those constitutional dynamics have a positive side, they also have kind of their downside too. Same is true with Vata, right? That air ether element quality can manifest as fear a lot of times, right? That tension and nervousness, anxiety can manifest as fear, and which is ultimately kind of this unknown, right? They kind of have this sense of the unknown, and rather than cultivating trust, they tend to react out of a place of fear. But that same fear quality is really creative genius, right? I mean, a Vata type person has this visionary ability, this kind of clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant qualities where they can see into the invisible world, right? And they're creatives, and if they take that fear and channel it into some form of artwork, right, that they can move that energy in a healthy way. And so I mentioned this because we've got these three doshas have this really incredible ability to give us a model for understanding someone's psychology in a pretty simple way, but how just by treating that constitution, we can actually be tending to people's minds with our herbs, right? So when someone has, say they have a lot of Vata in their body, and they got the gas and the bloating and maybe some cramping and some stress and tension in their mind, but maybe they have that chronic fear, right, in their psyche, and maybe that fear holds them back from taking big steps forward in terms of achieving and living their life purpose and their life dream. Well, the moment you start giving them even like some carminatives or some antispasmodics or some gentle nervines to start working through the physical side of Vata, the psychological side of it is going to start to clear too. But my favorite system for integrating psychology into our practice of herbalism is astrology. And the reason why I like astrology for understanding the mind, understanding the psyche, is that it's really, really specific. So whereas with the three doshas, you basically have three primary patterns to look at. And you can get a little more specific when you start to combine the doshas. But when we look at, for example, the 7 planets of astrology, of Western tropical astrology, we have a very specific way in which the mind is put together, right? That those 7 planets can be said to be the 7 psychological functions that all human beings carry, right? We all have a Mars and a willpower and a drive. We all have Mercury, a communication aspect, Venus, a relational building facet of the self. We've got an inner sun. We've got an inner purpose and connection to our true self. So we all have these 7 planetary qualities within us, but we all manifest them really differently, right? That some people have their communication, their Mercury in Pisces. Some people have their Mercury of communication in Aries, and those two Mercuries are going to express really differently, right? It's going to form a different kind of psychology and a different type of emotional patterning as well. And it's like that with all of the planets. So what's so cool about astrology is that I always say it's a bridging language, that through the language of astrology, we're able to connect the above and the below, right? We're able to connect our spirituality, our psychology, and our physiology in one system. And that's why it's so powerful, and that's why it's such a, I would say, essential part of what I call the evolutionary herbalism model. It's just the model of plant medicine that I've been developing over the last decade. And astrology is a critical piece of it because, you know, if you look at someone's birth chart, say you look at your own birth chart, well, you can look at that birth chart and you can look at all the planets and all the signs and all the houses and the whole way that your natal chart is put together, and you can say, okay, this is the map of the soul. This is the journey of my soul, and the kind of the recipe or formula for its transformation, right? That the birth chart shows us all of our growth edges, right? What our soul needs to learn in order to further its development and its evolution. And you can also kind of shift gears in the way you look at that chart and say, okay, this is the way my mind is put together. This is my psychology. Here's how you know, my primary emotional dynamics are. Here's my goals and dreams and aspirations. Here's my limits. Here's my boundaries. Here's where I need to be more disciplined. Here's what gets me out of bed in the morning, right? My action. And here's how my relationships should be, and what determines what a healthy relationship looks like for me, right? So looking at these psychological emotional dynamics in the chart, but you can also look at the chart and say, this is my physiology, right? This is how my body is put together. This is how my constitution is. This is how my organs communicate with one another. This is how, you know, the different energetic qualities of hot, cold, wet, or dry will tend to manifest in each of my organ systems, etc., right? So you can do all of that, but you're looking at the same chart, right? You're looking, it's one birth chart, and you can look at it through the lens of the soul. You can look at it the lens of psychology. You can look at it through the lens of physiology, and you ultimately see how they're all the same thing, right? It's all one pattern reflecting on these different levels of the self. And so when I really started working with astrology and herbal medicine, it was like that next level, right? It was exactly what I was looking for, because from my perspective, I was like, look, you know, for the way people were coming to me asking for help, it wasn't like, oh, I got gas or cramping or a cough. It was, hey, I've got this stuff that I'm trying to work through in my life and in my spirit. I've got these patterns that I keep bumping up against that I feel like are holding me back. Can you help me? You got some plans that can help me with that? And at first it was kind of like, you know, these are the ones that I've worked with for myself for those kinds of things. Give it a shot, you know, and sometimes it worked. And I was like, whoa, like that didn't just work for me, that worked for this person too. So there's some sort of map here. There's some sort of blueprint. There's some truth to this ultimately, right? There's something real going on here. But what I really wanted was a system, right? A way of kind of classifying and understanding different psychological and emotional states in some sort of blueprint that then I could relate to my herbal medicines. And it was astrology that did that for me and has proved to be an extremely precise system of seeing how psychology and physiology are really just two sides of the same leaf, two ends of one spectrum that is ultimately the wholeness of being human, right? And in that way, we can work with our plants to address the physical and psychological aspects of our core patterns that we struggle with as human beings. So I just wanted to share that with you today and talk a little bit about the way I like to address psychological factors with people through using either the 3 doshas of Ayurveda, but also through using astrology as one of the major tools that I have in my toolbox for working with and helping people with more of these subtle levels of healing, because I know a lot of people out there want to be using herbs to address psycho-spiritual dynamics and kind of want a little bit more of a system, right? That you know, the intuition is an incredible tool for working with people, but I know there's a lot more people out there that maybe they don't feel like they have a super strong intuition. Maybe they feel like they want something a little bit more, I guess, intellectual, or a little bit more of a framework for breaking down psychology and how herbs can correspond and be helpful for that. And so the 7 planets are the main pattern that I use there, and it served me well. I'm continually learning more about it, and it's just nothing short of an incredible tool and an ancient tool. I mean, this goes all the way back to Egypt, goes all the way back to Renaissance medicine, the way herbal medicine was practiced through Europe for a very, very long time. And somewhere along the way, I would say in favor of our more modern day science, the astrology kind of got left by the wayside. And I believe now is the time for us to bring astrology back to herbal medicine, to reintegrate this lost tradition, and bring about that system of using herbs to heal that weaves in our psychology, our spirituality with our physiology. So if you're interested in astrology and want to use it with your herbal medicine, maybe you're curious about how those might connect together, be sure to plug your name and email on the page here. We're offering the Astro Herbalism mini course now. There's 3 videos here going in depth on how the pattern of astrology relates to people, our physiology, our psychology, our spirituality, how the astrological pattern relates to plants, how you can classify and understand plants based on this astrological pattern. I'll even break down for you how to look at your natal chart, your birth chart, and how you can start working with herbs to strengthen the constitution, balance any excesses or deficiencies or weaknesses, and ultimately reach that next level of health and vitality and spiritual evolution with herbal medicine. So plug your name and email somewhere on the page here. I don't know if it's above or below, but plug it in there, and you'll get that first lesson in the Astro Herbalism mini course. I hope you'll check it out. These are really unique teachings that I have been researching and studying and developing over the last decade of my work with plants and planets. So I hope to see you in there. Thanks so much, everyone, for checking out this video here. If you like it, hit the like button. If you know of someone that would be interested, hit the share button and share it with someone that you know and love. And be sure to scroll down, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. If you got any questions or comments, I'd love to hear about it. So thanks so much, everyone, for checking this out. I'm Seja, and I'll see you soon. Until then, take care and be well.